Next on stage, Chase Lochmiller, CEO of Crusoe Energy.
Chase and I were having dinner the other night, and you're such a fascinating character. I was like, we got to find a way to get you on stage, sort of in the crypto world. You climbed Mount Everest.
I did.
Yes. And you are sort of helping to power a lot of what's going on. You're really working in the chip world. So I think can give people a totally different piece of the picture than what we've been talking about. Can you just start off telling us the origin story of Crusoe and sort of the background in crypto and where you started off?
Sure. So just a bit of background. I spent sort of the first 10 years of my career as a quant portfolio manager in the financial sector. And we were really leveraging AI models to forecast security prices, commodity prices, and as deep learning became very popular, we started adopting deep learning techniques to sort of train these big statistical forecasting models. And in that role, I was always a massive user of large clusters of computing resources. And then I got pretty deeply involved in the crypto ecosystem. I was an early partner with a fund called Polychain Capital. Really got a front row seat to just
a top crypto fund.
Yeah, one of the largest and one of the first movers in the space. It was started by a guy named Olaf Carlson. He was the first employee at Coinbase. But in that role, it was kind of like I sort of got this front row seat to everything, all this crazy stuff happening in crypto and proof of work blockchains and decentralized monetary ecosystems that were fundamentally being empowered by low-cost distributed computing infrastructure. And for me, I really wanted to work at sort of, I felt like the biggest lever in terms of advancing human progress and facilitating innovation was going to come from wider access to data and cheaper computing infrastructure. And having been on the other side of things, I'd always experienced that computing, the largest operating expense associated with computing infrastructure comes from energy. And this is what's led to crypto miners around the globe seeking out low-cost energy resources.
Were you operating as a crypto miner or servicing crypto miners?
Prior to starting Crusoe, we had sort of worked closely with a handful of crypto miners, but wasn't doing it directly. More as kind of a hobbyist.
And I mean, part of the technology, you're like placing them near oil fields, or explain that a little bit.
Yeah. So let me maybe explain what Crusoe does as a business. We're focused on powering computing infrastructure with low-cost, stranded, and environmentally friendly energy resources. So one of the sources that sort of powers this is sort of what's called flare gas that happens in the oil industry. So oil companies will drill for oil. One of the byproducts of that oil production is natural gas. When they don't have access to a pipeline to actually transport that gas, the best and most economic thing for them to do is just light it on fire. And it's one of the worst greenhouse gas emission sources in the world. It accounts for about 2% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and nobody benefits at all. It's sort of just this unmitigated negative externality for the planet. Our innovation was that, that's a problem because it's hard to get the gas to a market, but could we bring a market to that gas? And we did so with computing. And so we build, operate, and manage these mobile and modular data centers that get co-located with waste energy resources. And we're able to sort of set up the appropriate networking for the right application, whether it's training a large language model or mining Bitcoin. They have very different networking requirements and characteristics, but different sites fit better for different applications.
So play tour guide for a second of what's going on with GPUs and AI chips.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Nvidia, I think, announced the H200. We've got sort of AMD trying to come in. We've got all the cloud providers. Like, right now, I guess to give you a specific question to start with, how many of the chips for large language model training come from Nvidia? Or is Nvidia dominating sort of what people are using right now to train large language models?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably obvious to everybody in the crowd that NVIDIA is the king, and NVIDIA has been very, very dominant in the AI sector, and that was really a product of Jensen making a lot of prescient investments, more than 10 years ago, and really building out the full ecosystem, both beyond sort of the accelerated computing hardware stack as well as the software stack, right, and building out this whole CUDA ecosystem, investing in high-performance networking, and like the acquisition for Mellanox is, I think one of the best acquisitions that, has been made by big tech companies. And, I think one of the interesting aspects is, compute at the chip level is very, very important, but sort of an under-discussed component is actually the high-performance networking to enable, training of big, large language models, as well as, multi-GPU and even multi-node inference for some of these bigger models. High-performance networking becomes a very, very critical component of the overall ecosystem.
Yeah, so I'll follow up on that in a second.
Yeah.
Who do you see as the closest competitor to Nvidia, or what's the most relevant chip besides that at the moment?
Yeah, so I think it's really exciting kind of seeing what's happening with AMD. I think AMD's been sort of in the shadows for a long period of time, and I think they recognized both that the software component and the software ecosystem was a big part of Nvidia's dominance, and they've invested a lot in ROCm, and you can sort of somewhat seamlessly port your CUDA code to running on AMD hardware, which I think is a big enabler for people to try other hardware resources. But we're very bullish and very optimistic on the MI300X.
That's AMD?
That's AMD, exactly. So, it's going to be coming out in test right now, but 2024, it's going to be sort of available in broader quantities. But the interesting component here is, if you look at an H100, for instance, it has 80 gigs of VRAM, so 80 gigs of high bandwidth memory. The H200 that was just announced has, I think, 141 gigs. But the MI300X has 192. So, you can do a lot more with a much bigger model.
So these might be cheap someday, or you think, is demand going to keep the price going up, or supply how does that?
Yeah, so look, I think demand, there is a supply-demand imbalance. There's not enough supply, and the supply chains that need to catch up in order to meet the demand in the marketplace, they're not like quick-moving supply chains. You're talking about building more EUVs so that you can produce more 3 nanometer, 5 nanometer silicon. These are multi-year type investments that take a long time to actually materialize. But so I think there still will be a shortage, but I think it's probably good for everybody in the world to have not a single company have such a dominant market share. We love Nvidia, and we think they are really incredible company in terms of the pace of innovation there and their ship cycle, and they've really been pushing the bounds. But I think for the AI community at large, I think it's really healthy to have multiple hardware vendors that are supplying the market and are providing competitive pressure.
So the layer above chips, there are these companies that want to optimize chips. Together is one of them.
Yep.
How much? Yeah, can you sort of explain that? How much do you want to play in that space, and how much are you seeing sort of core foundation model companies outsource, like, okay, we're not going to have the chips, and we're not even going to have the optimization of the chips. Those can be outside. We're just going to do the thinking and programming and all that. Or how do you see that all sort of gaming out at the moment?
Yeah, so there's multiple layers here. You sort of have the base foundational layer with kind of the overall chip architectures that are designed by Nvidia, AMD, Intel, et cetera. And then you have sort of the cloud service providers. That's really where Crusoe fits into the picture. We've built a high performance virtualization stack, high performance networking stack to deliver virtual private cloud and high performance node to node communication so that people can train big models over clusters of GPUs. Then, above that, further up the application stack, you have folks like Mosaic, folks like Together, folks like ML Foundry that are doing really incredible optimizations for getting the most out of the hardware. I think those teams have done a really great job in terms of modeling, profiling a model, making the most of how data gets fed into a training workload or an inference workload so that you can really get the most out of things. So it's kind of the difference between an average consumer driving a Ferrari and an F1 racer sort of driving a Ferrari. What you're going to get out of it is going to be dramatically different. And I think there's a lot of opportunities for a lot of different groups to innovate. I think at the CSP layer.
CSP.
Sorry, cloud service provider.
Oh, yeah,
Where we fit into the picture. I think one of the things that we're focused on is, we take this very energy-first approach to building infrastructure. You look at the forecast, it's, today data centers consume something like 1 to 1.5% of global power consumption. Most forecasts have us 10 years from now, data centers consuming 10%.
Yeah, this is huge. This is a big part of what I want to get out of here.
Yeah.
So, I feel like in crypto, there was a whole conversation about like the effect on global warming, energy consumption. it feels like with artificial intelligence, we've been excited, and then eventually we start to think, oh, what are the like tertiary consequences of diving headfirst into AI? So part of it is the energy impact. So you're articulating. Explain that a little. What is the energy impact right now of AI?
So, I totally experienced this with crypto where, when the Bitcoin white paper was first published, it was like, oh, cool, there's this like magic internet money and people are doing this peer-to-peer transaction of a digital asset and, people were running proof of work on their laptops and it was sort of a insignificant power consumption. And then as adoption grew and as demand grew, people realized the value of having a, non-centrally controlled, globally decentralized store of value. It was like, oh, institutionalized mining is consuming, something like the energy footprint of Argentina. Is that something we should be worried about? Like, probably. And, it was one of these things where I think energy use on the surface of it isn't necessarily bad. It's a matter of where that energy is coming from. And I think that's one of the needles that Crusoe's tried to thread is that
the energy is being used for useful things. And
well, not even that it's being used for useful things, but that it's not accelerating a climate crisis. I mean, if you're, powering all of crypto mining with, infinite supply of clean nuclear fusion power, like, who cares? I mean, that's like, if it creates value for the people in the ecosystem, I think that's overall a net positive. And I think, we're at the early innings of sort of experiencing the same, wake-up call within AI. The CEO of Digital Bridge came out recently and said that their forecast for AI alone was going to be 38 gigawatts of digital infrastructure.
What does that mean?
So, putting it in perspective, if, all of that were used at 100% capacity and AI were a country, say, so using this equivalent thing that I mentioned on Bitcoin, that would be approaching the top 10 power consumers in the world. So it would be just ahead of the United Kingdom and Saudi Arabia, just below France and Germany. So this is a really
insane.
Massive energy user, which, is just something that we have to be thoughtful about approaching because, if we solve AGI, but, we sort of accelerate a climate crisis and eliminate 95% of the species on Earth in the process, like what do we actually do? So I think our core mission is really trying to unlock all of that innovative potential, but by being very thoughtful about the energy that goes into powering it, we can actually do so in a way that doesn't have those strong environmental consequences.
Are you on a path to nuclear, or there are some of the AI? Sam Altman is very bullish on both nuclear and OpenAI. Are you exploring that world at all?
Yeah, so we've looked into a couple different nuclear opportunities. We've always been very pro, both fission and fusion. We have an LOI with a new development in the fission space that hopefully will be coming on. It's probably gonna be a couple of years, but on the fusion space, actually, some fusion companies are actually our customers. They're leveraging the same accelerated computing resources needed to train a large language model, but to do computational physics to model, the particle physics interactions in a tokamak, for instance. So, to me, it's like it's a hard proposition to society to say, hey, we should all consume less because that's what's good for the world. I think inherently as humans, like we have an infinite demand for progress, and progress involves consuming more. What we need to figure out is the ways to invent solutions that are actually sustainable. So, fusion is a great example. I think we've made a lot of progress in wind, solar, geothermal, and we just need to be doing all of these things to sort of advance our energy demand in a way that doesn't accelerate a climate crisis.
I wanted to take a second on the sort of crypto to AI piece of it. You've sort of experienced both. I think there are some people here who would be like, well, AI is real and crypto is dumb, and so that's the team we're on. Some people would say cynically, Silicon Valley is just addicted to hype cycles, and that was a hype cycle, and this is one, or they're both good. How do you, what's the lesson? Clearly, crypto wasn't a bubble. What are you running an more AI-oriented company now? What lessons do you take from the crypto experience?
So I'm of the camp that crypto still will be a very important component of the global financial ecosystem, for years to come. And this kind of comes from my libertarian mindset that having an independently, non-centrally controlled store of value is an important thing to have. We've sort of had gold for gold for centuries as that resource that people could buy and no one could infinitely inflate the supply of gold, in sort of a centrally controlled manner. And so I think having that within a financial ecosystem is important. But I do think that, the hype cycle that happened in crypto, especially in 2021, we got a little bit ahead of our skis in terms of what value was actually being created for society.
Do you think we're in that right now for AI?
I think we are in that a bit for AI, but I think there's a...
I say at an AI conference, but yeah, happy to push at the bubble.
Look, I'm no one is more optimistic about the AI supercycle than me. I mean, I kind of view it as the ultimate meta science in terms of AI as a mechanism of understanding and navigating data and understanding and navigating the world. And I fundamentally believe it's sort of this super science that will make literally everything better, from how we discover new drugs, how we understand the world. I saw a research paper published recently that was from the University of Texas at Austin, where they actually came up with a earthquake forecasting technique, reading seismological data, where they could actually predict 1 week in advance with 70% accuracy an earthquake. And to me, that's only going to get better. Right. These type of breakthroughs are going to really fundamentally change and drive forward how we adapt to an ever-changing world. And and that's not even touching on all of the amazing productivity gains we're going to see in the enterprise. Totally. With how we create, how we write, how we create media, et cetera.
I want to go back before we wrap. You were playing sort of tour guide. We talked about chips. We talked about people above them, the cloud providers like AWS, Google, Microsoft. Yeah, do you think they're safe, their dominance sort of stays in place, or do you think sort of the quick embrace of AI, the role of Nvidia, is a true threat to them, or how do you see their role?
So what I would say about the big incumbent CSPs is that they've really done a great job of migrating IT to the cloud and migrating IT off the on-prem solutions that have been historically used and made them easy to move into the cloud. But in doing so, they've really tried to be everything to everyone. And when you look at AI as an application, it's fundamentally just a new type of computing infrastructure that's needed to support it. Just to give you an example, a single H100 node, you really need to budget 12 kilowatts of power for it. It's like a really power-hungry single node. Now, if you look at traditional data center infrastructure, most traditional data center racks have 7 kilowatts of power and cooling budget. So you can't even put a single node into a traditional data center rack. So it's really caused us to have to reinvent how we think about the actual digital infrastructure to support this tidal wave of innovation. And the other thing I'll say about the big CSPs is they sometimes don't have AI consumers' best interests at heart.
They push their own products.
They push their own products, exactly. They've made legacy choices and legacy decisions. They're trying to build their own chips. They have their own high-performance networking solutions. Like AWS has EFA that just fundamentally is less performant than something like InfiniBand. And
Chase,
sorry.
We could talk about this all day. Thank you so much for reminding us that behind is sort of talking to an AI, there are chips and so much power in it. And I guess oil fields and natural gas. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Silicon Valley. Goodbye. Silicon Valley.